Okay.
Mr. Turner? Mr. Turner? Keontae? I said Mr. Turner.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Okay. Absent.
Okay.
Okay. So a quorum of the Board of Education is present. The regularly scheduled meeting of June 1st, 2020 is called to order. We'll now have the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand and face the American flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God,
under God.
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Tonight's agenda has been previously distributed to the board. A motion has been made by Mr. Korberg and seconded by Ms. Como to approve the agenda as submitted. Unless there is a motion to amend, we will have a roll call vote.
Ms. Como?
Aye.
Mr. Jimenez?
Aye.
Ms. Leahy?
Aye.
Mr. Lee?
Aye.
Mr. Meyer?
Aye.
Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Mr. Spivey?
Abstain. Wasn't on the call.
What's that?
I just got.
He abstained. I think it just came on, so
Yeah.
I don't think I.
I thought it abstained.
Mr. Spivey, we're taking a vote to approve the agenda as presented. How do you vote?
Aye.
Thank you. Dr. Cooper-Stoll?
Aye. Okay, so there are no public speakers registered for the evening. We will move to the consent agenda announcements.
Well, board members, I know that our Director of Human Resources, Mr. Mark White, has announcements for the board's consideration tonight. Mr. White, thank you. See a few new items on the board agenda, fresh from today. So we had some recent action in the HR office over the last couple of days, but did want to point out to you two administrative hirings on the board agenda tonight, and both of those new administrators are here. If Dr. Cooper-Stoll, if you'd like to have them come up after the approval, they would love to express their thanks for their hiring. First one is a sort of a refiguring of a position for Garrett Zimmerman, who Garrett will be the halftime principal at the new Polytechnic school, which I understand they're getting ready to move things here down there at the end of this week, which is great. So he'll serve as a halftime administrator in that building. Garrett earned his MEPD from UWL and his bachelor's also from UWL. He has been the teacher leader this past year at Polytech, where he proved what a job he can do, and led partly to this appointment, certainly by the work that he did this school year, bringing LDI and Seven Rivers together. And Garrett has taught at the LDI for 6 years prior. The second appointment tonight is for Cary Halter as the new principal at Northwoods International School. Cary earned her bachelor's at UW Stout in marketing ed and her master's from Cardinal Stritch in ed leadership. She was a teacher at Badger High School for 10 years and 1 year as a teacher in Holman, and for the last 12 years has been the middle school assistant principal at Holman Middle School. So very happy to have both of those appointments and all the work that led up to that, to having those appointments on the agenda tonight.
The consent agenda is a mechanism used by the board to deal with routine business that must come before the body. Are there any items that members want to remove from the consent agenda? Can I get a motion and a second to approve the items on the consent agenda?
Agenda as presented.
Second.
A motion has been made by Ms. Como and seconded by Mr. Korberg to approve the items on the superintendent's consent agenda as presented. We're going to have a roll call vote for that.
Ms. Como?
Aye.
Mr. Jimenez?
Aye.
Ms. Leahy?
Aye.
Mr. Lee?
Aye.
Mr. Meyer?
Aye.
Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Mr. Spivey?
Aye.
Dr. Cooper-Stoll?
Aye. Okay, so with that, I'll just follow Mr. White's order here and ask Mr. Zimmerman if he'd like to come up and say a few words.
Yes, thank you so much for the faith in me to continue leading La Crosse Polytechnic. Got to see the building last week, and it is beautiful. All credit goes to Joe Lidbina, Scott Johnson, Mike Frabler in Buildings and Grounds, Matt Kobe, Mike Hansen in the tech department, Michael St. Pierre, all their work. I'm thrilled to continue this process of trying to build the best school for my students and teachers. So thank you for the support for the school and your continued support as we move downtown.
Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
leadership, Mr.
Thanks, Cary.
Zimmerman.
Good evening. I have to tell you, I am absolutely thrilled to be coming on board at Northwoods, and I just sincerely appreciate the opportunity. I am humbled and excited to begin the work there, and I have been welcomed so warmly into the district already by so many people, and that's a real testament to the work that everybody is doing here. I look forward to getting to know all of you individually and also becoming more familiar with the work that you do. I think that Northwoods, like so many of our schools, is such an amazing place, not only with the choice and the project-based learning, but when you're thinking of a school based on things like balanced and being principled and showing a global perspective, I think that is even more important in our current times and situations. So again, I am so excited. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for believing in me and approving this tonight, and I look forward to getting to meet all of you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
And as we often do, we will exit and go sign those contracts so that you know we're not absolutely interested in everything else that goes on at the meeting tonight. But we need to take care of this first. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. White.
Mr. White. Okay, we will now move to the board consent agenda. Looks like we just have some meeting minutes on there.
Make a motion to approve the items on the board consent agenda as presented.
Second.
A motion has been made by Ms. Como and seconded by Mr. Jimenez to approve the board consent agenda as presented. We will have a roll call vote for that.
Ms. Coble?
Aye.
Mr. Jimenez?
Aye.
Ms. Leahy?
Aye.
Mr. Lee?
Aye.
Mr. Meyer?
Aye.
Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Mr. Spivey?
Aye.
Dr. Cooper Stoll?
Aye. Okay, so with that, we're going to move down to the information portion of this meeting. We're going to begin with the graduation requirements for Seven Rivers Polytechnic School.
Well, board members, I'm going to turn this directly over to Stacy Everson, who is our Director of Secondary Education. I believe she's here with us, and Stacy's just going to talk a little bit about that. This is something we would anticipate to bring back as an action item. It does propose a change to the graduation requirements at the Polytechnic School, and that does require eventually board approval if the board is supportive of doing that. But I know Stacy's prepared to share with you why we think that's an important thing to do.
Thank you, Randy, and everyone. I'll take that as a yes. So thank you for the time this evening. This agenda item is fairly simple. Our Seven Rivers Community High School, soon to be known as La Crosse Polytechnic School, has operated with a graduation credit total requirement of 26 credits. And the informational request is to adjust that 26 credit graduation requirement to 24. The rationale behind this request would be to align the graduation requirements for our current Seven Rivers Community High School students and to be La Crosse Polytechnic graduates to 24 credits to align with the Central High School requirements and Logan High School requirements. This has been a discussion item amongst administrators and teachers for over a year. So as you'll notice on the document that Laura has, I think, shared with all of you, this discussion took place with the Crosse board back in September of 2018. and their minutes would reflect an agreement with this revision. And our district curriculum council also discussed this revision and the reasons for it this past school year. By aligning the graduation credits for Seven Rivers High School students to be that of Logan and Central, it would allow for ease of access to graduation requirements for students that wish to transfer from Logan High School or Central High School to Seven Rivers. And it also eliminates that barrier of confusion in trying to develop four-year plans for students. If you are curious and wondering what does this actually change for Seven Rivers graduates, it doesn't change any core requirements. However, it would change the credits required for advisory. That's a relationship between the students and the teachers of Seven Rivers. Their Phi-Ed credits and Healthy Living credits. And Healthy Living was basically an elective course that's related to Phi-Ed and Healthy Living. So the Phi-Ed credits of Seven Rivers graduates was in excess of what Logan High School and Central High School required. And again, just to reiterate that both the CRULC board and our district curriculum committee was in agreement with this revision. So our request is for you to review this information, and if you agree, we will begin to make that change inside our Skyward database.
So board members, we do intend to bring this back perhaps as part of the superintendent's consent agenda on the June 15th Board of Education meeting. But if there are questions for Ms. Everson, please, board members.
Any questions or comments? Thank you, Ms. Everson.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll now move to the Achievement Gap Reduction Report from Dr. Lahucky.
Yes, Dr. Lahucky standing by to give us, this is a required report twice per year. We are required by the lawmakers to share this information with the Board of Education. And I know Dr. Lahucky has really been working hard to pull all this data together this evening. Dr. Lahucky. Yeah, okay.
That's a pretty good joke.
Yeah,
so I will say this. We have a few new board members. So let me go in a little more detail on the Achievement Gap Reduction, how the program works, how we meet that requirement. But I do actually want to talk about the data a little bit as well. Although, as Mr. Nelson mentions, the spring data might be a little lighter than most years. So Achievement Gap Reduction replaces SAGE. SAGE was enacted in order to reduce class sizes, and the Achievement Gap Reduction is a similarly funded program that allows schools to earn aid in one of three ways. One, we can have one-to-one tutors, we could have instructional coaches, or we can continue the SAGE requirement of grades K through 3 by keeping our class sizes to 18-to-1. What we've decided in La Crosse is we use instructional coaches in all of our elementary schools to meet the requirements of AGR. There are some schools that may go above the 18 and collapse one of their courses, or sections, I should say, and in return they can get a behavioral or academic interventionist that they might not have access to without AGR. For AGR, we use a number of local tools. We use standardized tests for assessment and reading. We call it STAR, local assessments, and also developmental reading inventory, the DRA2. If you look at the data, and I know some of you have heard this from the winter presentation, you will see that every year, we started tracking back in fall 17 in this manner, but you'll see the data gets stronger as the year progresses. That is because we're measuring against end-of-year standards, so that's expected. We expect that as the year progresses, we have more and more students that would be considered advanced and proficient. We find the STAR assessment, it's linked to the Wisconsin Forward, so we use this assessment to figure out what gaps are in our progress towards proficiency when the Wisconsin Forward does come around. With this data, when we're able to, we break it down by different reference groups. So the reference groups that we use, economic status, race and ethnicity, gender, disability status, and ELA status. And you can see how we do in each of those groups and compared to one another. Another tool that we use is the student growth percentile. That is actually part of STAR as well. And what that is measuring what the expected growth is compared to likewise peers around the country. If we were, let's say, an average student with average growth, the SGP would be 50. So anytime we see numbers above 50, that means that we are closing gaps towards proficiency and increasing our proficiency, I should say, because SGP takes your starting point. And everybody has a different starting point. If you and I were taking the test, let's say you were a high flyer, you would still have an SGP and be expected to grow compared to students that were achieving at a similar level. And if I was a student that had not yet grasped mastery of standards, those are the students nationwide that I'd be compared against in my growth. So the SGP is a very interesting measure. And as you can see, for the most part, our SGP is above 50, which means that we are closing gaps with our instruction towards proficiency. The last tool we look at are some local assessments, which are kindergarten, letter sound assessment, number recognition assessment, and something called the DRA2, which is given to all of our students. Those are, I will say this with the DRA2, those are locally developed benchmarks. And we typically see an ebb and flow. We're pretty rigorous in where we set our grade 1 percentage on track throughout the year. So those numbers can really move up and down. And the last thing I'll say before turning it over to questions regarding assessments is to put a plug in for the results policy that the workshops that are coming up. Tools like STAR or iReady or some of these universal screeners that we have, we can be a lot more fluid and adept with. If I had to rely on state assessments that have changing standards and benchmarks by grade level, for example, like at the third grade, you might have to be at the 60th percentile to be considered proficient, and at the fifth grade, you might need to be at the 75th. It's a moving target with these state assessments. And this year is a perfect example. We did miss the spring assessment window. We've missed all that state data. But with these local universal screeners, we can be a lot more fluid and a lot more granular in what we look at for our data. So I just want to put a plug in for June 15th when we start to have that discussion of how you want to see data. And this is one example of what it could look like. That is a little bit about AGR. Do you all have any questions?
Are there questions or comments for Dr. Lehucky? Thank you, Dr. Lehucky.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good day.
Okay, so we're going to move to announcements. Mr. Korber?
Regarding the Public Education Foundation, we had our regular monthly meeting last Tuesday because, of course, Monday was Memorial Day, so we moved it to Tuesday. Just a couple of things to note. The annual chili cook-off will not be held this year, which no one's really surprised, but they are going to look for, the foundation will look for ways to try to make up some of those revenues as well as some of the other revenues that they're not going to be taking in. But overall, it looks like the budget is going to be okay for the year. Some of the staff will be moving back to Hogan. I think it's this week, and they'll be taking turns, switching on and off in the morning or afternoon, so there's only be one person at a time in the office. The Thank a Teacher is still going on. There was an ad in the Tribune a few weeks back that talked about all the teachers and staff who are retiring, and you're welcome to contribute to those who either you know or want to recognize. And then just a reminder that the Bow Tie Classic, which is the foundation's main fundraiser is still set for September 5th. It's a Saturday. It's the first Saturday in September. There may be some adjustments, such as having dinner together and things like that, but they do plan to play golf, and there may be some adjustments with some of the things, like a time start versus a shotgun start kind of thing as well, but they do plan to hold it. That's what I have.
Thank you, Mr. Korberg. I just have a couple of things. One, a reminder that our next meeting on the 15th is followed by a workshop. That's going to be the first of 2 workshops that you're aware of. There will likely be some materials coming ahead of that workshop, so be on the lookout. The second thing is, if you've checked your district email, you know I sent a draft of an op-ed in light of recent events this afternoon. I think I've connected with about half of the board members. But if you would, review that, offer some feedback, suggestions. I always hate to ask someone to do it and give them a quick turnaround, but time is of the essence. And so I'm going to ask that I hear from you by 2 p.m. tomorrow. And in particular, let me know if you haven't already, if that's something that you're signing on to. I'll entertain questions or comments about that when we move into debriefing. For now, I'll just turn over to Superintendent Nelson if you have any announcements.
Yes, just a couple. Thank you. You're pretty much on your own, is what we were told, after the Supreme Court decided to kind of pull back on the governor's executive order. And so we have been in a few phone calls and webinars with several superintendents and some other leaders in the state. But suffice it to say, in this kind of vacuum of orders and directives, we've really been pleased with the work that La Crosse County Health Department has done with trying to categorize and using data to help us better understand where we are. And we're really excited to see that last week, as effective Friday, we moved from a red zone, which is where we've been in for quite some time, into an orange zone. Certainly doesn't mean that we are not, that we're out of the woods. But it does help us do a few more things. And it was actually that decision that helped us also decide, let's keep the planning going for July. We pretty much know at this point that through June, our summer school offerings will be pretty much scaled back so that they're going to be virtual, more remote learning, as we have been doing. But we are leaving out the opportunities and leaving out the options that in July we could actually do some small group kinds of pieces, 12, 15 students perhaps at a time, especially in the areas of reading and mathematics, some of the core areas that we can support some students, especially those who may have fallen a little bit behind in the gap of time that we had here. And so we're working on that, and we also have not ruled out the start for Hamilton and Northside. Our principals are working very diligently there to try to figure out how we can make that happen. It is not; those two schools are not hugely challenging when it comes to transportation. So those schools are ones that we could probably get up and running, but it's going to be a little bit of a different schedule, and there are going to be some restrictions that will still need to be in place. But we are hoping that by the end of July, assuming that the numbers keep moving forward in a positive way, that we could be in a yellow zone. And a yellow zone would allow us pretty much to have 45 or 50 students indoors, congregating indoors, but 100 perhaps outdoors in different ways. Still with some social distancing and some other caveats, but it's good to see some of that opening. And if there's one thing that we think we've really realized here over the last few weeks, our kids really miss our students, and our students are missing our teachers. This is a human relations business that we're in here, and the face-to-face, the relationships are so important. That said, the obvious is that this Friday is the last day of school as it's listed on our school report card. I think I can tell you that in some places it has wound down faster than that. But I know that this week we have several of our elementary schools in particular where our parents are coming and students are coming to pick up belongings and also to turn in their devices. And so by the end of the day on Friday, we'll be putting a wrap on this very, very interesting school year, but a great school year at the same time. That's my report. Thank you.
Thanks, Superintendent Nelson. Are there any other announcements from board members?
Larry, this is Chet. Can I say something?
Yes.
I just want to, my son graduated from Lincoln 8th grade this year, and so I just want to comment and give a shout out to Mrs. Murray and her team at Lincoln for I participated in a virtual graduation, and I thought they did an outstanding job with that. I was really impressed by it, and I talked to a couple other parents, and they said the same thing. So just a shout out to the folks over at Lincoln that helped produce that, and then also for making my son have a rewarding years in middle school.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. Are any other announcements? So we will move to agenda planning.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the June 15th, 2020 Board of Education agenda with any additions or corrections.
Second.
A motion has been made by Mr. Korberg and seconded by Ms. Como to approve the June 15th, 2020 Board of Education agenda with any additions or corrections. We will have a roll call vote.
Ms. Como? Aye. Mr. Jimenez? Mr. Jimenez?
Aye.
Thank you. Ms. Leahy?
Aye.
Mr. Lee?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Meyer?
Aye.
Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Mr. Spivey?
Aye.
Dr. Cooper Stoll?
Aye. Okay, we will now move into board debriefing.
I have a question.
Okay.
A couple of them, if you will. First thing is, so when we essentially are dealing with an issue or whatever, so for example, let's just use this agenda as an example. So you have this agenda, and if we had questions about the agenda, will we ask the questions before we say aye, or do we have to wait till we say aye in order to ask questions?
No, there can actually be, after a motion's made and been seconded, there can be discussion on the agenda. I think there's a pause in the beginning if there is any motion to amend the agenda, but you're talking about just in case you had questions about it?
Any of those, like if I'm just using this as an example, not saying that I do.
Yeah,
but like
yeah.
if I wanted to challenge something or question some things before we vote, at what point does that happen?
So,
My understanding as part of Robert's rules is that Lori said it correctly. There's a motion, there's a second, then the discussion happens before a vote takes place. Once the vote is done, there should be no discussion on that issue.
Awesome, thank you.
Usually we have the information the meeting before.
My next
We discuss
is in regards to the email that was sent out for the op-ed piece.
yes.
I'm curious to know, is that the only piece of, I don't know, would that be the only thing that this school district will send out is what's going to be presented in that op-ed, or has there been something that went out to parents and things of that nature?
I'm going to turn it over to the superintendent for that one.
Yeah, Mr. Spivey, I'm working on a draft right now, and my intention is to get something out to our parents by the end of the day tomorrow.
Okay. Can I also make a suggestion? And again, if I'm out of turn, y'all just let me know. But I think if there's something that this school board or the school district folks can do to specifically reach out to its Black and brown families to check in or let them know that you're thinking about them at this time, I think that that's important across all grade levels.
Thank you. That's a great suggestion. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Spivey. And thank you for your questions. Are there any other comments or questions with regards to tonight's meeting during the debriefing? Okay, so with that, oh, my computer's locked up. Oh, there we go. Okay, so with that, we'll adjourn.